Welcome back. We're still talking Egypt, and we certainly have loads of comments from our online community,
yes,
right?
Yes, they're buzzing. And interesting, very first comment comes from Mona El-Thahoui, and she says, before yesterday, Sisi ran #Egypt from back seat. Today, he's in the front seat. Ex-head of military intelligence is press of #Egypt. Good morning, fascism. That's very sarcastic there. And then she went ahead to say, we really didn't need an election. We knew Abdul Fattah al-Sisi sweeps to victory in #Egyptian presidential elections. And a lot of people saw that coming in, obviously. And Amro Ali says, Sisi will never be like Nasser till he can achieve Nasser's 99.9% victory
That's
in
the
the
former
1956
president.
polls. You want to say something to that?
Not really. When you compare both, you always need to go back to the turnout of the election. And if, at that time, it was, popular participation, and now what you have is a limited participation, irrespective of the support base, you're still going to have a limited participation that you cannot remove from the entire process.
Okay.
And that's just it.
All right. And Ahmed Kadri says, Sisi defended virginity test and is former head of the most patriarchal institution in Egypt. Yet women voting for him. #Egyptian elections. And Nidia says, we Twitter users are the dissident voice. We ought to say what the media won't. Sisi's victory wasn't a landslide, but a sham.
Ouch.
#Egyptian elections. Robert Shaw says, no surprises there then, at least not with the result. Ironically, I think the last elections were more democratic. #elections. Now, there seemed to be a lot of, query, in quote, about the whole election exercise, the atmosphere and all that. Now, Hugh, let me ask you this. From the tweets that we've read so far, and from various, social media comments, there seem to be a lot, concerns and query about the whole election process, the atmosphere. It seems somewhat rigid and controlled. In fact, on Tuesday, the Prime Minister Ibrahim says, those who do not vote will be fined $500 Egyptian, which is about $70 US. What do you make out of that? Does that really sound free and fair?
Or is it even necessary?
What are your thoughts on that?
My thought is that this is a rather desperate attempt to try and drum up more voters, because this election is being seen as a referendum on General Sisi, and the government feels, the Egyptian authorities feel they need to get a very large turnout, certainly more votes than President Morsi got in the 2012 election. They want they need this to establish Sisi's legitimacy. So this is the best chance they've got. Of course, it's not going to work. This election is only going to further divide Egypt because so many Egyptians don't recognize this election, and they just see this as yet another wrong step.
Okay, so let me ask this. What does the average Egyptian want from its leader or his or her leader? So what do they want? What kind of leader do they want right now?
Egyptians right now want stability and security above all. And the economy, there's many social and economic problems here. And this is what they need to be addressed. This is what Sisi is promising, that above all, security. He's saying, nobody in Egypt is very happy about electing in a military man 3 years after a revolution which kicked out a very, very similar military man. But Sisi's argument is, you might not want me, I don't want to run the country, but I have to do this job because otherwise Egypt is going to slide into chaos like Libya, and only the Egyptian army can keep the show on the road. That's his argument. But of course, the Egyptian army has ruled Egypt for 60 years, and we've seen that they are not very well suited to ruling the country. And the Egyptian people have become more agitated and keen to express their anger
Okay.
So it's hard to see Sisi being able to ride out this storm now as he tries to tackle these problems that he's facing.
Okay, yep.
Hugh, you know, let me chip in something here. You know, we know from reports that there was, you know, very, you know, little coverage, you know, especially at the polling stations where, you know, journalists were being detained or even, you know, arrested, you know, in the attempt to cover, you know, exercises at the polling stations. And we also know that there are over 200 journalists, you know, behind bars in Egypt. Now, bearing that in mind, what kind of a person, how would you best describe al-Sisi? And what kind of a leader do you project he would be, bearing that in mind, the crackdown on journalists?
Well, I mean, regarding the crackdown on journalists, I mean, this has been shocking, what's been happening in Egypt. I mean, particularly the Al Jazeera journalists. There are 4 of them who've now been in prison for many, many months. You know, it's inexcusable what's happening. You know, it's just as bad or worse than anything that happened in the past under the previous Egyptian government. So, you know, hopefully Sisi will turn that around. It's very hard to know what Sisi is really like. I mean, what's clearly a very intelligent man. He is clearly very devious. He was, of course, appointed as Minister of Defense by former President Morsi because Morsi trusted him and thought he was an Islamist, or he had sympathies to the Islamist movement. And then, of course, he was involved or headed the group to remove President Morsi from power.
So he's a very complex man, I must say. He's saying a lot, but not really saying enough. But Liborius reacts to this. Is there press freedom in Egypt?
No, but presently, not that I know of. And that's why. And that's if freedom of the press is not guaranteed in a climate like that, then you wonder what the people, the average, you know, Egyptians, go through, you know, in their day-to-day life, interacting with the government. And that's why some people will tell you that I would rather not participate in the process because, like I said, you want to be very careful so as not to be tagged, you know, an Islamist or a terrorist. And so that basically, and then also, if I also remember during the election, the first day of election, even some of the observers were very careful when journalists interviewed a couple of them. They were very careful, you know, and choosy with their answers. And, you know, when the barrage of questions were coming, some even had to avoid, you know, journalists so as also not to be tagged, a spy on the activities of government. And so, like he has said, and I agree completely also, it's you need to show, al-Sisi needed, you know, the military needed this to show that the entire country accept al-Sisi as the Messiah that is to come. And that's why they were very particular about the turnout. They needed to show that the support base was not a narrow one, you know, it was a broad base. But mind you, majority of the opposition, and including the press, ordinarily that would have shown, you know, some form of transparency or some form of
But to show the way things really are.
fraudulent moves,
Yes.
exactly. We're also not allowed
Silence.
to do
Okay, so
silent.
now,
And so,
what do you think? Are we just looking at at the beginning of another revolution?
yes, that's why I believe if care is not taken, you know, he probably will not be able to achieve, you know, what he set out to, because the Egypt of 10 years ago is not, excuse me, it's not the Egypt of today. Most especially, you know, with the uprising that greeted, you know, Mubarak administration in 2011, the people had suddenly woken up to the fact that they can actually, you know, insist on their rights and, you know, and then also demand for certain things. And now, finding you know, it's very, very unfortunate for you to, you know, go through all of this, and then with the terrorism that had greeted, you know, the aftermath of the uprising, and then you wake up to the fact that all of this struggle leads you back to pre-2011. Nobody will want to take it, even though his focus would be security and the economy. And what's the economy? We're talking about tourism and the rest. It will take some time also for tourists to actually, you know, believe that it's, you know, safe enough to come in. And then these same people that you have handed into exile will not sit back and fold their hands and allow you, you know, to have an easy ride. And so that's why, and because the awareness is massive, much more than it was before,
so
and that's why it's not
people are more involved in the politics of the day than they probably used to be.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, I would hold you there. And Hugh, please stay connected to us, because now we're about to go on another break, but we'll be right back. Today is a day that shows how divided Egypt has become.
Huge exodus of Muslims out of Central African Republic. The conflict in the country has really depleted the population.
TVC News, reporting Africa through African eyes.
The African woman has been described as a superwoman. She is versatile, educated, ambitious, and shrewd. Yet, she's a homemaker, many times a breadwinner, and loving. Come and meet the African woman here on A Woman's World, where we discuss issues affecting women and at the same time celebrate their achievements and check their latest trends in fashion and lifestyle. All on A Woman's World, Tuesday, 8:30 Central African Time on TVC News through African Eyes.
Welcome back. So, Hugh, Sisi has won, there's no if about it. Let's say he actually wants to restore stability to Egypt. What do you think he needs to do? And to win back trust?
What he needs to do is reconcile with the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamist movement. You know, Egypt is a very traumatized and divided country, and they need a statesman, a kind of Nelson Mandela-like figure, who can be bold enough to bring together the two sides of Egyptian politics, which are the Islamists and the Muslim Brotherhood on one side, and the army and the liberals on the other side. So he needs to have a truth and reconciliation and forgive and forget. He also needs to reform the security services and the police and the army, which are too involved in politics and too corrupt. He is perfectly placed to deal with these problems because he himself is the head of the army, and he is personally responsible for the breach with the Islamist movement. So he is in many ways the ideal man to fix Egypt's political problems, because he is, you know, partly responsible for them.
Okay.
And the other issue are social and economic problems. And for this, the best plan is the plan of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, that has a very sound economic plan for Egypt. Basically, it involves reducing the size of the state, cutting subsidies, and encouraging the private sector. So this is, you know, a good plan. It's doable, but it will be painful to introduce. But this is what he has to do: reduce subsidies and develop the private sector.
Okay, so Hugh has been very detailed. I'm sorry, Hugh. Let me bring Liborius into the conversation. So Hugh has been very detailed in, you know, the list of things that al-Sisi will have to do. Maybe that's why Sisi is asking for 2 years when Morsi was only given 1 year. Do you want to comment on that?
These are what he should do.
I think the problem is that Sisi is dependent on outside countries for financial support. And those countries do not want him to reconcile with the Islamist movement. Secondly, Sisi himself has a strong incentive in having a violent insurgency in Egypt, because this means that he becomes the guarantor of security. He can say to the West, "You might not like me, but you have to support me, because if you don't support me, Egypt will collapse." So, in fact, he benefits from conflict because this makes him indispensable. And this was Mubarak's argument. Mubarak has said, you have to keep giving me money and support because otherwise you'll get Islamic extremists.
All right, Hugh, you're making very interesting points, but let's Liborius, comment on this. Very interesting. So either way, al-Sisi stands to gain from all of this.
Yes, what basically I was going to say was that the reconciliation that you're expecting might take a long way coming, because the world as we stand today, it's not in a hurry to reconcile with these Islamic groups. And then also the way it's the leadership of the world had positioned itself, to strangle most of these groups. And then also, the modus operandi of the groups also, it's not the one that is accommodating to the West. And so that's why you see it's a cat and mouse game.
So are you trying to say that it will be difficult for Sisi and the Islamist group to ever work together?
It will be difficult, because if you look at al-Sisi and the support base, that was why for the first time we saw, when Morsi was ousted, we saw America finding it difficult to find its voice, condemning what actually happened. We saw, the Western world finding it, foot dragging on whether to condemn it or not to condemn it. And so we actually know where, al-Sisi's support base is coming from financially. And so like they say, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And if the support base is coming from a particular direction, you would expect also some form of instructions from that direction. But by and large, it's about the average Egyptian. It's about moving Egypt forward. And how they want to move forward is a different ball game altogether. It's totally left to him. If moving forward means, relying on the West to supply the finances and then also stabilize the economy relatively and then consistently battle insecurity, if that's the kind of stability he wants, it's up to him. If on the other hand, the stability he wants, it's, Egypt belongs to us, and we are the ones that will make, Egypt, the kind of Egypt that we want. It's, that's when you're now beginning to talk about, okay, to hell with, the West, and now I need to look inward and see how we can reconcile. Let's fend for ourselves. Let's fend for ourselves.
Okay, Moses, do you want to jump in with the online community? Let's hear what people have to say about this.
In fact, there's a whole lot of tweets coming in. And now, okay, Fatima, let's start with Fatima Sahid. She says, I'll be honest, I underestimated the effect of boycotting, but hashtag Egypt elections just proved me wrong. Boycotting can have a huge impact. Now you know, Fatima. And Ahmed Kadri says, Sisi defended virginity test. Okay, I think Ahmed is repeating his tweet. And Nidia says, we Twitter users are the dissident's voice. We ought to say the word in media. Okay, there's a lot of
retweets.
Yeah. Okay, now Darren says, as hashtag Egypt counts votes, journalists count 152 days in prison. A lot of people will argue that's quite undemocratic. And Javier says, Sisi's democracy begins like Mubarak, wins the election with only 92% of the votes. Only? 92%?
Well,
We can as well say only 100%.
but you know, earlier when we were discussing, you were trying to make me understand why 92% is not that large.
lot.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because like I said, if you're discussing 92% of, if you have let's say, a population of 60 million voters, and then you have 80% participation of these 60 million, and then 92% would be large. But if you have the same 60 million voters, and then you have 20% participation, if you score 92%, what you have is 20% less, 7% of the total vote cast. What it still means is that you are a minority, because out of the 60 million voters, the people that participated in the process were less than 20 million. And so that's why, if you, like we had said here consistently, al-Sisi needed to show that the support base was not narrow. And then also what he did also.
You look like you have it. Okay, quickly.
Quickly, what he did also, the parliamentary elections were supposed to come before the presidential election. But he needed to, secure, the presidential election before the parliamentary, so it would be easy for him now to manipulate and dictate
pick his people.
and pick whoever goes to the parliament.
Hugh, finally, I have this question for you. Earlier, I asked Liborius, and I want to address this to you. Is this an end to revolution in Egypt with this election and, with the results? Or do you see them gathering again?
No, I think that the wheel of change in Egypt has been frozen temporarily, but I don't think that this election is going to bring stability to Egypt. I think that what will happen is, in a matter of months or maybe in a year, when Sisi has failed to deliver and the Egyptian people get fed up with him, then his popularity will collapse as quickly as it formed, and you will see a very, very large crowds, maybe millions of people back on the streets, and then we don't know what will happen to Egypt. There's a number of scenarios, none of them very good.
All right.
It could end up sliding into
all right, thank you.
some kind
Very
of
quickly, we're running out of time.
Hugh,
insurgency.
based on what you've said, what kind of a leader do you think al-Sisi would be?
Okay, I think you can't hear
How
us
do you
well.
project
really, we
al-Sisi?
can't even take any more. That's
Okay.
how far we can
Yep.
go on the program. Don't worry, we'll continue talking online because the conversation has not ended. So don't forget to go back online and keep sending in your tweets, your Facebook comments, because as always, we want to hear from you. Goodbye.